Alright, so this is going to be a quick video of how to skim a book. Um, you would want to skim a book to figure out if the book is worth your time, because you don't always want to read every single book from front to back. Sometimes you'll need to skim the book to also figure out if the book you're reading has the relevant information to whatever question you are trying to find or answer. So skimming is pretty basic. We'll go over it. So we start off with reviewing the table of contents, because the table of contents gives you a lot of information of how the book is gonna go. So let's see if you guys can see it. So this table of contents is actually it's How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler. It's split up into four parts. Part 1 is the dimensions of reading. Part 2 is the third level of reading, analytical reading. Part 3 is approaches to different kinds of reading. And Part 4, the ultimate goals of reading. So just from that alone, we can get an idea of how he's splitting up the book, where he teaches us first how to what kinds of reading levels there are. Then he tells us about what the third level of reading is for being an analytical reader. And then he gives us an idea of how to read different kinds of books, such as STEM books versus literature books versus psychology, business, and so forth. And then the ultimate goals of reading, which is this little section over here at the end, is called the syntopical reading. It means how to read multiple books and figure out what the argument is between those books. So if I wanted to learn about how to make a business from scratch, I would go ahead and read a few books about business and then try to extrapolate the common theme of all of those books. Or maybe I don't, because you don't need to apply those techniques to every single book, but you could do it. Next is to read the blurb or jacket. So for this one, I don't think it has one. No, it doesn't. This book doesn't have one. Book of Five Rings has a jacket. The jacket is basically this piece. The jacket is important because it actually tells you right here what the book is about. It's summarized. So you should read the jacket, because you can find out right away if this book is worth reading or if it is something that you want to read about. Third rule is to skim the index. So the index will actually... This one's about 10 pages, I believe. Oh no, it's only 6. 21, 26, yeah. It's only 6 pages. So it's not a lot, but it's in small print. So what this tells us is he has a lot of indexes. So he has a lot of references. He has a lot of points where he uses these references. So what we could do is we can look up a reference that is important to us and then go straight to those pages, so we can actually find the vital information in this book a lot faster than if we were to just sit down and read from beginning to end, because we won't always have that time available to us. As well as the citations in the book itself, because the citations at times will tell you where the important arguments are located at. So that's also a time saver. And then skim a few pages of the chapters. Now this point is important because we're trying to get the gist of the book's argument, and if the reader is smart about it, he'll look for it, just because the author will actually give it to you. Like, the author is trying to make it semi-obvious that this is the message of the book. These parts are the important parts of the book, and sometimes the author will tell you right away where they're at. So, for a book like where I was just had it. Oh, this is embarrassing. A book like Rich Dad Poor Dad, it says it right there. It's a summary of the chapter. So if you wanted to like just read the summary of the book or the book's chapters, some authors just give it to you right away. So you can find out if this specific book is to what you want to learn about finances. That also goes in tail with point 5. They're kind of intertwined even though they're still separate points. Because at the same time, other pages will tell you important bits of information from the book. Sometimes we would want to look at the summary, find out if it's relevant to us, and then we could go skim the pages or chapters to get a gist of how the author comes to that summary. And then lastly, just read the preface. The preface will tell you exactly how to read the book. Some authors will tell you to read it in one sitting. Like this author, in his preface, he tells you read it in one sitting. It's only 120 pages long. It's not that long. Just read it in one sitting. It's a lot of useful information, and it's better read that way. This author tells you to read it in multiple sittings. Just because you don't want to read this book from beginning to end. He didn't make that book that way. He made his book to be read. Look at one chapter here today, come back at it in a week. Look at it again, come back at it in another week, and so forth. Look, come and pick at the parts that you want to look at. This author, I had to read his book multiple times. First, I read it and I barely understood it. The second time I read it, I had to go at it at a much slower pace just because he has a lot of useful information where some parts are important to know now, others are important to know later. So it actually helped to read it twice just because I had to learn the first basic parts and then I could go on to the intermediate and the advanced concepts. And to summarize is to look at the table of contents, read the jacket, skim the index and citations, skim a few of the pages and chapters, look at the headline, find the summaries, and read the preface. The preface tells you important information. If you can do all this in a good 10 minutes, you'll get a very good gist of what the book is about, and you can figure out if the book you have at hand is actually worth reading.